The most powerful immigration pathways to the United States, the EB-1 and EB-2 categories, could be facing a major shakeup. And on top of that, the H-1B visa program, which millions of skilled workers rely on, could soon come with fees so high it feels like a luxury tax just to enter the lottery. Sounds unbelievable, right? But this is exactly what's happening in today's immigration system. And if you or someone you know is planning their American dream, this is the news you cannot afford to ignore. For decades, the EB-1 and EB-2 employment-based green card categories have been lifelines for talented professionals across the world. These categories were created to attract the best and brightest. Think researchers, engineers, doctors, business leaders, and exceptional talents who could contribute to the US economy. EB-1 was the crown jewel, designed for extraordinary individuals at the very top of their fields, while EB-2 gave a pathway for advanced degree professionals and people with exceptional abilities. Together, these categories shaped America's reputation as a magnet for global talent. But now that very system is being questioned, and some experts are warning that the so-called gold card reputation of EB-1 and EB-2 may be slipping away. Why? Because the demand for these green cards has skyrocketed, while the supply, the annual quota set by law, hasn't changed in decades. This mismatch has created long backlogs, especially for applicants from high-demand countries like India and China. In fact, for many EB-2 applicants, the waiting period is no longer just a few years. It's decades. Imagine working, building your career, paying taxes, contributing to the US economy, but still having no certainty about when or if you'll ever get your green card. That's why people have begun questioning whether the EB-1 and EB-2 categories still live up to their promise, or whether they've turned into a long, frustrating waiting game. At the same time, the US immigration system has been piling on additional costs, paperwork, and complications. Nowhere is this more obvious than in the H-1B visa program. For years, the H-1B has been the primary gateway for skilled professionals to enter the US workforce. Tech companies in Silicon Valley, hospitals in major cities, and universities across the country have all depended on H-1B workers to fill critical roles. But here's the catch. Applying for an H-1B has become more expensive than ever. The new fee structures being proposed are jaw-dropping. We're talking thousands of dollars in government fees alone, not even counting attorney costs, filing expenses, and the time it takes to prepare a proper application. For many companies, especially smaller startups, these rising costs make sponsoring an H-1B worker almost impossible. And for applicants, it raises the uncomfortable question: is the American dream only for those who can afford it? The program was already competitive, with a lottery system that leaves tens of thousands of qualified applicants out each year. Add in these crazy fees, and the H-1B is starting to look less like an opportunity and more like a gamble where the house always wins. But here's the twist. These challenges aren't happening in isolation. They're part of a broader trend, where US immigration is becoming more complex, more expensive, and in many ways, more unpredictable. Policy shifts, political debates, and bureaucratic backlogs have combined to create a system that feels less welcoming than it once did. And for many international professionals, the calculation is changing. Do you wait in line for 15 years hoping for an EB-2 green card? Do you invest thousands into an H-1B process that may not even get picked in the lottery? Or do you look elsewhere? Countries like Canada, Australia, or the UK, which are offering simpler, faster, and sometimes cheaper paths to permanent residency. The reality is that the United States is at risk of losing the very talent it once worked so hard to attract. EB-1 and EB-2 were supposed to be the gold card of immigration, the highest recognition of skill and contribution. But when that card is buried under endless backlogs, its shine starts to fade. And when the H-1B program becomes a pay-to-play system, it raises questions about fairness, access, and America's ability to stay competitive in a global talent market. Now, don't get me wrong, people still want to come to the United States. The opportunities, the innovation, the promise of a better life, they're all still here. But the system itself is showing cracks. Families are stuck in limbo, professionals are stuck in visa traps, and employers are struggling to plan for the future. This is why so many immigration experts say we're at a crossroads. Either the US modernizes and reforms its visa and green card systems, or it risks losing ground in the global race for talent. And that brings us to the heart of today's story, the uncertainty. Nobody knows for sure how long the EB-1 and EB-2 backlogs will last. Nobody knows how high the H-1B fees will go. And nobody knows whether reform will come in time to fix the problem. But what we do know is this: immigration is no longer just about law and policy. It's about economics, competition, and the lives of real people who are caught in the middle. So as we dive deeper into this topic, we'll look at the winners and losers in this system. Who still benefits from EB-1 and EB-2? Who is being left behind? What does the H-1B fee hike really mean for companies and workers? And most importantly, what are the alternatives for those who refuse to give up on their dreams? Stay tuned, because in part 2 we're going to break it all down. From the myths versus realities of the so-called gold card categories to the ripple effects of a more expensive H-1B process, we'll explore why this matters not just for immigrants, but for the entire American economy. When we left off, we were talking about the uncertainty surrounding the EB-1 and EB-2 gold card categories and the skyrocketing costs of the H-1B visa. Now let's dig into the winners and losers in this system. Because as complicated as US immigration can be, there are always groups that benefit and others who pay the price. First, let's talk about the winners in the EB-1 and EB-2 game. At the top of the list are applicants from countries with lower demand. If you're from a country that doesn't have tens of thousands of applicants each year, your wait time for an EB-2 or even EB-3 can be significantly shorter. In other words, while an applicant from India might wait decades, someone from a country with fewer applicants could secure their green card in just a couple of years. That's a massive difference, and it highlights one of the biggest criticisms of the system, that where you're born often matters more than what you've achieved. The other group of winners? Those who can qualify for EB-1 extraordinary ability. Now don't get me wrong, this is not an easy category to qualify for. You're talking about people with major awards, published research, national recognition, or groundbreaking achievements in their fields. But if you do qualify, EB-1 is still one of the fastest ways to a green card because it avoids some of the backlogs of EB-2. In fact, in certain years, EB-1 has been the only category with relatively current priority dates, making it a golden ticket for those at the top of their industries. But let's flip the coin and look at the losers in the EB-1 and EB-2 system. The most obvious group is applicants from India and China. Year after year, they make up the majority of applicants in high-skilled visa categories, and year after year, they face the steepest backlogs. Some experts estimate that an Indian applicant in EB-2 today might never actually see a green card in their lifetime if the system isn't reformed. That's not an exaggeration. That's the brutal math of supply and demand. Families are stuck in limbo for decades, unable to fully settle, buy homes, or plan their futures because their legal status is tied to an endless waiting line. Now, let's shift gears to the H-1B visa and the winners and losers there. For big tech companies, think Google, Amazon, Microsoft, the fee hikes are painful but manageable. These are billion-dollar corporations with entire legal departments dedicated to immigration compliance. They'll keep sponsoring workers because their need for talent is too great. In fact, some argue that the new fees might actually help big tech by squeezing out smaller competitors who simply can't afford the rising costs. And that brings us to the losers, small businesses and startups. Imagine you're a small tech startup trying to bring in a highly skilled software engineer from abroad. You already face the lottery system, where odds are less than 30% some years. Now add thousands in extra filing fees, legal costs, and uncertainty. For many startups, that's a deal breaker. They'll either give up on hiring international talent or move their operations abroad to countries with more flexible immigration systems. And who loses out in the long run? The US economy, which thrives on innovation and entrepreneurship. Here's the bigger picture. When H-1B fees rise, it's not just the companies who pay. Workers pay too. Many applicants end up covering some of the costs themselves, and for those who do secure an H-1B, the stakes are higher than ever. Imagine paying thousands of dollars only to get rejected in the lottery. It feels less like a visa process and more like buying a ticket to a raffle where the odds are stacked against you. So what does this all mean for the future of US immigration? The truth is, the system is in desperate need of modernization.